The smell of blood I can recognize from 5 meters away. But this one smelled like iron, rain, and home. That was the first thought I had when the clinic doors burst open, and the storm walked in wearing a human face. The neon light above the entrance flickered, slicing his silhouette in flashes, wet leather jacket, dark hair plastered to his forehead, and a hand clamped over a bleeding shoulder. Behind him, another man tried to follow. But my night nurse, Emmy, blocked the way with her usual charm. "Not you," she said, voice sharp as disinfectant. "One bleeding hero per night shift." The stranger's eyes cut toward her. Gray, alert, military. Not a patient's eyes. A hunter's. "Doctor," Emmy hissed, throwing me a glance. "You might want to see this one before he drips on the tiles again." I sighed, pulling on gloves. "Put him on bed too. And get me the lidocaine. No, the strong one. He looks like he bites." That earned a low chuckle from the man. "Only when provoked." I didn't answer. My hands worked by habit. Gloves, saline, gauze. The wound was deep but clean, like a knife or bullet graze. Professional injury. He wasn't drunk or panicked. Too calm. "You were lucky," I said, pressing the gauze harder than necessary. "An inch to the right, and you'd have a matching hole in your lung." "Wouldn't be my first," he said easily. His voice, low, rough, vibrated in the space between us. "Hold still." I reached for the needle. "This will sting, bite, or sting. Depends on your pain tolerance." He smirked. "Try me." So I did. He didn't flinch. Not even when the needle pierced flesh. But I caught the smallest twitch of his jaw. The exhale that wasn't quite steady. He was trained, disciplined. Yet the air between us shifted, thickened, pheromones bleeding through antiseptic, alpha. It hit like static against my nerves, but faint, restrained, almost masked. I'd worked around alphas before, treated worse. I could handle it. "Breathe," I said. More for myself than for him. He looked at me with a half smile that didn't reach his eyes. "You're an omega, aren't you?" My fingers paused on the suture thread. "You diagnose your doctors now?" "It's the scent," he murmured, leaning slightly closer, ignoring the sterile boundary I'd built between us. "But it's wrong. Off frequency. Off." "What?" "Like a broken signal. Familiar, but not right." The thread slipped from my fingers. I caught it before it fell, forcing my tone flat. "Maybe your sense of smell is concussed. Now stop talking." He chuckled softly. The sound curled through the air like smoke. Outside, thunder rolled. Inside, the only rhythm was the hum of fluorescent lights, and the faint snip, pull, tie of my stitches. Emmy leaned in the doorway, sipping her coffee like this was late-night entertainment. "If you two are done sniffing each other, I'd like to mop before dawn." "Emmy," I warned. "What?" She shrugged. The tension's sterilizing the air better than alcohol. The alpha, whoever he was, almost smiled. "She's got a point." "Name?" I asked, cutting the last stitch. "Cass." "Full name." "Just Cass." I raised a brow. "And you, just Cass. What exactly happened?" He tilted his head. "You don't believe in small talk, do you? Not with bleeding men who dodge questions." "Knife fight," he said after a pause. "Wrong place, wrong informant. Police?" "Something like that." He was lying. His pulse gave it away. Too steady for someone remembering trauma. I cleaned the wound, taped it, and turned to wash my hands. The metallic scent of his blood lingered even after soap and water. It crawled under my skin, sharp, electric. Behind me, he said quietly, "You smell like rain." I froze. "Excuse me?" "Rain, asphalt after lightning, and something familiar, antiseptic," I corrected dryly. "It's a new brand. Comes in, do not touch my instruments fragrance." He laughed, low, genuine this time. And for some reason that sound landed right under my ribs. "You should stay for observation," I said briskly, hanging the gloves. "Is that doctor's orders, or a threat?" "It's a precaution. You might have internal bleeding. Or maybe," he leaned back on the bed, "you just don't want me to leave." I shot him a glare sharp enough to pierce bone. "Trust me. If I wanted you gone, you'd be gone." He didn't move. Didn't even blink. "Then I'll stay." "For observation." Emmy groaned. Wonderful. Another stray alpha. Should I fetch a leash or coffee? Coffee, I said. Leash later. She winked and disappeared down the hall. Cass shifted, testing his shoulder. You're not afraid of me. Should I be? Most Omegas are. Most Omegas don't work night shifts with drunks and gangers. He studied me, eyes tracing my face, like reading a report. Then softer. You're different. I ignored the heat crawling up my neck. And you talk too much. He laughed again. The sound filled the sterile room, made the humming lights seem warmer. When he finally lay back, I turned to leave. My reflection in the glass cabinet caught the faint tremor in my hands. I told myself it was just adrenaline. Just another patient. But as I walked down the hall, the smell of rain clung to me, threading through the chemical air. It followed me into the empty staff room, where the world dimmed to hums and shadows. And somewhere between the pulse in my throat and the memory I couldn't reach, something inside me whispered, too softly, too old, home. I pressed my palm against the cold counter, steadying myself. He'd said it like a statement, not a question. You smell like home. I hadn't believed in that word for years. Not until now. By the time dawn clawed through the blinds, the clinic smelled less like antiseptic, and more like burnt coffee and exhaustion. Emmy sat on the counter, her legs swinging as she scrolled through her phone. Looking far too awake for someone who hadn't slept in 20 hours. Her short hair stuck out in every direction, and her scrubs had surrendered to gravity hours ago. You're unusually chipper, I muttered, stirring sugar into my mug. I'm basking in the aftermath of romance, she said, not looking up. That man last night? He was making eyes at you, Simon. The dangerous kind. Alphas love doctors with sharp tools. I took a slow sip of coffee. You hallucinate from sleep deprivation. Drink water. She grinned. He stayed, didn't he? Observation, right? I saw how you stitched him. Extra gentle. Emmy, I warned. Gentle. Before I could answer, the bell at the front desk chimed. An apologetic sound like someone afraid to take up space. Emmy groaned. If that's another drunk, I swear I'll check. I set the mug down and walked out. The boy standing there couldn't have been older than 16. Thin, hollow-cheeked, clutching his arm to his chest. His scent, Omega, but faint and ragged, like something beaten out of rhythm. His eyes darted toward every shadow, shoulders trembling with each sound. I need help, he said quietly. Please. I guided him inside. Sit. What happened? He hesitated. They said I wasn't supposed to fight back. Of course they did. The sleeve of his hoodie was soaked in blood. I cut it open carefully. Deep gash along the forearm, defensive wound. He flinched when I touched him. I'm not going to hurt you, I said softly. I know. You're different. That word again. Emmy appeared with gauze, and a look that could sterilize steel. I'll prep a tray. The boy relaxed a little under the bright lights. His name was Leon, runaway from a pack he wouldn't name. I didn't ask. I'd learned long ago that Omegas with that look needed stitches first, questions later. As I wrapped his arm, I noticed something. The kid didn't tremble at my proximity. Most Omegas instinctively responded to hierarchy, but he only stared with cautious trust. Maybe he couldn't sense it in me. Maybe there was nothing left to sense. You should rest for a few hours, I said. We'll find you clean clothes. He looked surprised. You're not going to report me? Would it help? He shook his head. Then, no. When I straightened, someone knocked on the doorframe. Cass. Still in the same dark jacket, shoulder bandaged neatly, the one I'd sewn closed. He held 2 paper cups and a small, infuriating smile. Brought peace offerings, he said, walking in. Coffee. For the hero and the nurse. Emmy snorted. Bless you, mysterious stranger. She took one and slipped out, whispering as she passed me. I'll be in the supply closet, eavesdropping professionally. Cass watched her go, amused. She's got spirit. She's got caffeine dependency. Why are you here? He held up the cup. Checking on my doctor. I'm fine. I meant the kid, he said, nodding toward Leon. But good to know you care. I ignored the way his gaze softened when it landed on me. He's stable. He'll live. Cass crouched beside the bed, lowering his tone. You're safe now, kid. No one's going to touch you here. Leon's eyes darted between us. You're an alpha. Cass didn't deny it. That a problem? The boy hesitated, then looked at me. Only if he bites. Cass's mouth twitched. Not without consent. I groaned. We have a no flirting during triage policy, agent whatever you are. He rose, stepping closer, too close. You've got rules for everything, don't you, doctor? This is a quiet zone, I said, folding my arms. No growling. I'm not growling. Then lower your voice. He leaned in just enough for his breath to brush my ear. I'm not growling, Simon. I'm calling home. The air went still. My pulse tripped over itself, traitorous and loud. Emmy's muffled whisper came from the hall. Holy mother of pheromones. Cass smiled slightly, turning away, like he hadn't just detonated the room. He picked up the clipboard from the counter, scanning my notes with lazy efficiency. You've got neat handwriting, he said. That's the most terrifying thing anyone's told me today. He chuckled, setting it down. The light from the blinds caught the edge of his jaw, the faint scar at his temple. He looked every bit the soldier he denied being. When he reached for his coffee, the sleeve of my shirt slipped, baring the skin beneath my collarbone. He stopped, his gaze locked on the faint circle just below my clavicle. A perfect, pale ring. A mark. But not a scent one. No heat, no pheromone trace. Clean, sterile, surgical. What is that? He asked quietly. I tugged the collar up. Old scar. That's not a scar. That's none of your business. Cass studied me, like he was cataloging every heartbeat. His voice dropped low, careful. Who did that to you? I said, it's nothing. He opened his mouth again, then stopped himself. Something in my tone, too sharp, too final. Leon shifted on the bed, breaking the tension. Doctor. I turned to him, forcing my breath steady. Yeah, kid? Thank you, he whispered. For not being like them. Cass's eyes flicked between us, unreadable. Like who? But I didn't answer. I just adjusted Leon's blanket and walked out, the smell of coffee and rain following close behind me. The basement smelled like old paper and spilled alcohol, dust layered over bleach, history preserved by neglect. The archive door stuck, then gave with a tired sigh, and the stale air closed around me like a coat one size too small. I told Emmy I needed 5 minutes to check discharge records. She lifted an eyebrow at the word 5 and handed me a key. If you're not back in 20, I'm calling the fire department and telling them you're allergic to daylight. Make it the police, I said. More dramatic. She grinned. Already here, meaning the alpha upstairs. I took the stairs anyway. Rows of metal shelves loomed out of the dim. Cardboard boxes, labeled binders. A wall calendar frozen 3 years ago, still announcing flu shots. The little things a clinic forgets to remember. I switched on the single pull chain bulb. It hummed, like a trapped fly. I wasn't looking for anything specific. That was the lie I told myself. My hands went to the surgical logbooks, the ones we used before the new electronic system bullied us into clicking boxes. The spines rasped under my fingertips. 2018, 2017, 2016, 2015. The steady rhythm of numbers, the comfort of order. I slid 2019 free, and let it fall open across the metal table. Neat columns. Names, procedures, initials. My initials. Simon Hale, MD. Date, 6 years ago. Procedure, laceration repair, night shift. My signature, at the bottom. Confident, practiced, like I'd always worked here. Except 6 years ago, I hadn't. 6 years ago I was somewhere else. I knew that the way you know you've left the stove on. Without facts, just the shape of absence. The room tilted, just a fraction. The bulb buzzed louder. Dust motes drifted like silent snow through the cone of light. I set my palms flat on the table. The paper was rough under my skin. Breathe, I told my body. It didn't listen. A corridor unfolded behind my eyes, too white, too clean. The memory didn't come like a film. It came in sounds. Rubber soles whispering, the click of a pen. The cold voice of someone I couldn't see. Omega-12 will not be assigned to a pack. Urban conditions only. My mouth tasted metallic, as if I'd bitten my tongue. The light in the basement narrowed, tunneled. Somewhere far away, water dripped. In the memory, a child, me, asked a question I couldn't quite catch. The answer came like frost on glass. You don't need a name to be useful. The room buckled. Smell is the first liar. It told me I was in the white corridor again. Lemon, and ozone, and a breath of someone's glove. Then the archive fought back with its own truth. Dust, ink, stale alcohol. The two battled in my head, until sound exploded into a high, electric ringing. I pressed a fist to my sternum. Counted. In for 4. Out for 6. The way I teach the kids when the world closes like a fist. Except numbers slipped like wet soap. Footsteps on the stairs. A voice at the door. Low, and ironed flat. Simon? I flinched at the name. Not because he used it, but because the memory didn't. Cass stepped into the cone of light. His jacket threw rain-dark shadows on the floor. Gray eyes, alert as ever, softened when they landed on me. He didn't touch me. He didn't have to. The alpha in the room tightened the air, then curiously, steadied it. Hey, he said. Voice pitched to something you could hold. With me, okay? In for 4. My lungs obeyed his voice like it came with instructions. I dragged air in. The ringing eased a hair. Good. Out for 6. We did it again. And again. The fluorescent hum resolved from a blade to a background noise. My vision widened, background shelves bleeding back into existence. I closed the logbook because looking at it felt like staring into a keyhole I wasn't ready to unlock. The pages made a soft, accusing clap. Cass's gaze flicked to the binder. Then to my hands. You look like you saw a ghost. Just a clerical error, I said. My voice was hoarse. I'm fixing it. He rocked back a fraction, giving me space. He smelled like clean rain and paper cups. I wanted to be angry at that, but anger took energy I didn't have. What are you really doing down here? He asked. Looking for myself, I said before I could stop the words. Then, sharper, don't analyze that. He didn't smile. He just nodded, like the answer matched something in a file. His attention shifted to the stainless steel cart near the wall, old lab requisitions, stacked there because no one had bothered to move them upstairs. He reached for the top sheet, then paused, seeking permission with a glance. Knock yourself out, I said. It's not state secrets, it's out-of-date paperwork and my terrible spelling. He scanned the form anyway, that hunter focus, clicking into place. I watched his eyes moving, the tiny stalls when he found something interesting. He reached past the first sheet, pulled a blood panel from last week. Mine because night shift doctors sometimes check their own vitals when boredom pretends to be caution. I'd drawn it after a dizzy spell, logged it but never imported the result. The lab had printed the panel and abandoned it. Cass's jaw tightened. He pointed with one knuckle like he didn't trust his fingers near it. Your basal pheromone markers, he said softly. Suppressed. Lots of omegas suppress, I said. Medication is a thing. Not with this pattern. He tapped the code at the bottom. AX9 inhibitor. Experimental. It doesn't show up in civilian clinics. My throat closed. You a pharmacist now? 8 years in the field, he said. Eyes still on the numbers. You learn to read the things that kill your informants. A beat. Or keep them leashed. Heat crawled up my neck. I didn't take anything. I know. He sounded certain, and the certainty scared me more than the idea he was wrong. You wouldn't even take ibuprofen without documenting it. There's a signature in your blood we use to track programs. He swallowed the last word like it tasted bad. Government, corporate, pick your poison. The white corridor flashed again. Urban conditions only. A small hand, my hand, reaching toward a glass wall. The impression of a woman's perfume, faint and wrong in the sterile air. I wrenched myself loose of it. Don't touch me, I said, because he'd shifted closer without moving, because the air knew what my skin remembered. Don't. I caught myself, dragged the words into shape. Don't touch me, Alpha. The title fell between us, like a sharp instrument. Cass stilled. No flinch, no offense. Just a recalibration. He took one measured step back, palms visible, predator accepting the edge of the room as a boundary line. Copy, he said quietly. No touching. Silence settled. The bulb hummed. Somewhere upstairs, Emmy's voice floated down like a lifeline, arguing with the coffee machine. I slid the logbook toward him. Then, at the last second, kept it. I couldn't explain why. Maybe because some part of me believed that if he read my signature on that older date, it would become more real than I could bear. He didn't try to take it. He studied my face instead, the way a soldier studies a map before admitting he's on the wrong road. "I'm going to ask you something," he said. "You can tell me to shut up." Wouldn't be the first time. He nodded at the requisition form. "Do you remember taking anything like this, being in a trial? A clinic with white hulls, not this kind of clinic." I tasted lemon and ozone again. The answer scratched the inside of my throat, and came out as a lie because I didn't have a better shield. "No." Cass let the lie fall where it landed. He folded the sheet, and slid it back onto the stack, as if tucking the question away would keep it from cutting me open. When he looked up, his eyes weren't hunter-cold anymore. They were something worse, understanding, not pity, assessment, and a choice being made behind it. He didn't say it out loud, but I heard it anyway, the way you hear the approach of a storm in your bones. Either he's a weapon, or he's a victim. The part he didn't say was the one that frightened me most, or both. The bureau didn't smell like blood or rain, Cass told me later. It smelled like polished steel and climate control, order scented to look like truth. He said Ada's office was glass and light, a wall of screens humming with other people's lives. He said my name out loud in that room, and watched a registry return nothing. While he was doing that, I was counting gauze. The clinic looked smaller in daylight. Emmy shuffled forms with a pen between her teeth, eyes on me the way nurses watch monitors, calm until they aren't. Leon slept, the kind of sleep kids learn in unsafe houses, surface thin, ready to run. Cass came back with bureau posture, trying to pretend it wasn't bureau. He set a paper bag on the counter like a peace treaty. "Blueberry," he said. "For who?" Emmy asked. "The Omega, the Alpha, or the Child Army?" "For the nurse," he said, which bought him 3 minutes of grace and a pastry. He looked at me then, and the room recalibrated. "Can we talk?" "In my office," I said, which was a closet with aspirations. He closed the door behind us. The hum of the clinic thinned. He didn't touch me. He didn't even lean. "Ada ran your name," he said quietly. Registry came up empty. "No clan? No genetic file?" "I know how empty looks," I said. It came out more bitter than I meant. "She thinks you're dangerous," he went on. "Not because you are, because the law doesn't know where to put you." I stared at the wall where paint had given up. "And you?" He breathed out like he'd been holding the question in his ribs. "I think the law was built for a world that isn't here anymore." He told me the rest in clean lines, Ada's warning. "Don't let him under your skin," the counselors who loved. Words like, anomaly. The way the Bureau's systems refused to admit a person it had paid to create. "Urban Gene Omega," he said. And the syllables crowded the office. Code name, city, under skin. Something in my chest tried to recoil and found nowhere to go. "That sounds like a poem written by a machine." Maybe it was. He searched my face. "Simon, there's nothing on paper that anchors you. No statute that applies. That's dangerous for you if the wrong people decide what that means. It's a shield if we move first." I didn't answer. On the other side of the door, Emmy was giving someone a lecture about hand-washing like it was a moral philosophy. The sound steadied me. A soft knock, the door opened a crack. Emmy slid in sideways with a file and a look. "Agent whatever you are," she said to Cass without apology. "Your badge tan is showing. Also, you scan rooms like a catalog. Your bureau." Cass's mouth twitched. "Observation. My occupation," she said. Then to me, lower. "You okay?" "Define, okay." "Not bleeding?" she offered. Then, relatively. She nodded once, satisfied by that filthy metric. "Kid's awake," she added. "Wants cocoa and a future. I can manage the first." When she left, Cass rubbed a hand over his jaw, like he was sanding down a choice. "Ada wants distance," he said. "She's right. The Bureau will call it protective custody. And actually mean custody. Yes." We stood in the little office that wasn't big enough for the words we were using. Finally I said, "I'm not running." "I know." He hesitated. "Ada will still tell me to arrest you. And you?" He made a helpless, quiet sound that didn't belong to the hunter I'd met. "And me?" We didn't solve anything in that room. We just named the problem before it named us. I checked on Leon. He was propped on pillows with cocoa mustache and a look that said he'd pretend not to hear grown-up words if they pretended not to notice him hearing. Cass adjusted the blanket the way people do when they don't know what to do with their hands. The city leaned on the windows. "I'm stepping out to call it in," Cass said. "Street or alley?" I asked. "Alley, fewer microphones." "Not in this town," Emmy muttered. But she let him pass. I followed to the back door and stopped there, listening to the rain gather its breath. Cass stood under the eave, communicator low, voice lower. "Field report," he said, ironed flat. "Agent Cass Ward. Subject, Dr. Simon Hale. Omega. No registry data, awaiting orders." Static. A bureau voice, with the personality of a ceiling tile, answered. "Possible. Match to Project Urban Gene Omega, codename City Under Skin. Confirm physical markers." Cass went very still. "That file was sealed." "Confirm, Agent." Through the glass, I saw our reflection blurred by weather. My shape in the doorway, his under the gray. I thought of the round scar under my collarbone, the quiet in my blood where scent should be loud. "If he's from Urban Geno," Cass whispered, the words barely audible, "we're all dead." Emmy's voice came from the hall behind me, soft as a scalpel. "Copy that." I turned. She held out a towel like it was a flag. "Dry him off," she told me, eyes on the communicator. "Then decide if we're doing this their way or ours." When Cass came back in, I took the towel and didn't touch him with it. He took it from my hands and didn't touch me either. "Ours," I said. He nodded once. Like a vow. Night makes the clinic honest. Without daytime chatter, you hear what a building really thinks. Pipes sighing, the roof dripping its slow Morse code, the wind testing the door with patient fingers. Sirens stitch the distant streets together, a loose seam of city noise that never quite closed. I was charting Leon's vitals when the door shuttered. Not opened. Hit. Emmy's head snapped up from the front desk. "We're closed," she called, voice flat. A rattling laugh answered her, the kind men practice on each other to prove nothing scares them. I was already moving. "Emmy, back?" Too late. The door flew inward, catching on the bell with a bright, cheerful ding that made the moment feel obscene. 3 men came in, heavy with wet leather and pack-sour cologne. The smell of them turned the air rank. Clan. Not one I recognized from hospital incidents, but they wore the posture, the swagger of men who think they own outcomes. "Where's the pup?" said the tallest. He had a face like a door you were supposed to walk through. "The marked one." Leon. "Sleeping in the ward." My body, apparently not interested in consultation, put itself between them and the hall. "Wrong clinic," I said. "Doc." The tall one smiled like a cut. "Don't make this a thing." He stepped closer, bringing his smell with him. Cheap spice, old beer, the metallic reek of someone who enjoyed hurting. My skin crawled, then went very still, the way a lake freezes in an instant when the temperature drops far enough. Emmy's hand slid under the desk toward the silent alarm. The one that connects to a police dispatcher who promises to send cars and then forgets because this neighborhood eats time. "Don't," I said without turning. "Back room. Now." Emmy hesitated. I gave her the tone I reserve for cardiac arrest. She bolted, steps quick and precise, keys already in her hand to lock the ward. Good. She knew what to do before I finished deciding. The tall one reached for my shoulder. I don't remember choosing to move. I caught his wrist, thumb to tendon, and wrenched. He grunted, surprise more than pain, right before my elbow found his throat in a clean, short arc. He stumbled, wind stolen, and I pivoted into the second man, stepped inside his balance, heel to instep. The kind of motion that seems simple until someone shows you how to do it with your whole body. He folded badly. The third drew a knife. Time narrowed. Not slow motion. More like everything else politely stepped aside. I saw the blade flicker, the angle of his shoulder, the micro twitch that telegraphed intent. My hands moved like they remembered a choreography my brain had never been taught. Trap, twist, pressure. The knife clattered to the tile. He grabbed for my neck, and I cut him off with a strike to the ribs hard enough to shiver his breath. "Simon," Emmy's voice, from the hall. "Door secure." The tall one recovered with a growl. He launched, a tackle meant to take me down by weight alone. I shouldn't have held. Physics says so, but I did, feet planted, spine stacked, and when he hit, I bled the force away, turned it, sent him skidding into the metal cart with a crash that exploded gauze across the floor like snow. Adrenaline made a tight ring through my body, bright and sure. My hands didn't shake. Every sound was crisp. The drip on the roof, the rasp of the men's breath, my own pulse steady as a metronome. The door banged again. Another body slammed through. Cass. He took in the scene in a single sweep. The knife. The men. Me holding too much ground. His mouth tipped at one corner. Thought this was a quiet zone, he said, already moving. Budget cuts, I said. He flowed into the tallest man like he'd been poured into the fight. No flourish, just efficiency. He took the man's knee with an oblique, snapped his head into the desk hard, enough to make the pen jar dance, and cuffed him to the base in one motion. The second swung wildly. Cass slipped the punch and folded him with a body shot that sounded expensive. The third went for the knife on the floor. I kicked it away. Not today, I said. He lunged at me instead. We collided, shoulder to shoulder, and something inside me answered. Too familiar, too wrong. My hands found his wrist and throat. My knee his thigh. I used his momentum, the way you do when the world taught you never to meet force head on. He hit tile. Hard. Silence slammed down, thick and strange. Cass's gaze cut to me. There was blood on his cheek. Someone's, maybe his. He didn't seem to notice. His eyes tracked my stance. The way I'd moved. The fact that I was breathing. Like a runner finishing a sprint, and not a man who should be on the floor. Simon, he said carefully. Like my name was a live wire. You with me? The room jolted back into speed. The tall one coughed. The second moaned. The third groaned through a swear. I straightened, senses still knife-sharp. If you're here for the boy, I told them, you've picked the wrong door. My voice sounded calm. It always does. You leave now, or you leave with broken arms. I have a preference. The tall one spat blood and laughed, but his eyes slid toward Cass. Cass lifted his badge just enough for the light to find it. You leave, he said. Pleasant as weather. Or you leave with me. And I'm less gentle than the doctor. We stared at each other. 4 men in a fluorescent room that smelled like old fear and new resolve. The tall one broke first. We'll be back, he rasped. No, Cass said. You won't. They went, limping, cursing, promising to return but going. Emmy popped her head from the hall, cheeks flushed, eyes bright. Is the part where I call a mop now or after the emotional fallout? Now, I said. Because if I said anything else, my throat might close. She looked at Cass's face and winced. Agent, you're leaking. He swiped blood from his cheek, blinked when his fingers came away red. Huh. Sit, I ordered, already reaching for gauze. You're not bleeding in my lobby. He obeyed. Some part of me catalogued that. How quickly he followed the command. How easily it settled into the air between us. I knelt, tilting his chin to find the cut under his hairline. The moment my fingers touched his skin, heat skittered up my arm like static. Hold still. Bite or sting? He murmured. Both, if you're lucky. His smile ghosted, then vanished as I cleaned the wound. My hands were steady, precise, the way they always are with work. But what ran beneath the steadiness wasn't fear. It was something else. Something that felt like standing on a high roof and realizing you want to look over the edge not because you might fall, but because the city is beautiful from there. You moved, like a trained, he began. Don't, I said, sharper than I meant. Don't name it. He shut up. He watched me instead, close enough that I could count the pale flecks in his gray irises. The cut wasn't deep, but it bled like head wounds do. Dramatic for effect. I taped it, and sat back on my heels. Emmy slipped past us, with Leon tucked behind her like a shadow. ICU's clear. He's safe. Leon's eyes were huge. Did you hurt them? I convinced them to leave, I said. He swallowed. They'll come back. Maybe, Cass said. But we'll be here. It landed heavy as a promise. The adrenaline began to drain, leaving a thin tremor in my hands. Cass saw it. His brows drew together. Simon, I'm fine, I said, and this time it was almost true. We locked up, swept glass, logged the incident in a way that would look like nothing to anyone who wasn't looking hard. Emmy muttered at the mop. Leon fell asleep in a chair with a blanket and a cup of sugar water masquerading as tea. When there was nothing left to clean, the room felt too small. I stepped outside, into the narrow slice of night behind the clinic. Rain had finally committed, falling steady and soft, the roof drip turning to a shiver. I sat on the concrete step and let the water cool the heat under my skin. Cass followed a minute later. He didn't speak. He just sat beside me, close enough that our shoulders almost touched. Not quite. We listened to the rain braid itself through the alley. "You did what you had to," he said at last. "Or what I was made to," I said. He turned, surprise glinting. "Which is it?" "That's the thing." I picked at a loose thread on my scrub pants. "I don't know." For a moment there was only the hush of rain. Then soft. The confession rose before I could strangle it. "Now you're satisfied?" I asked, hating the rawness in my voice. "I'm a monster." Cass's answer came without hesitation. "No." He said it like a fact, not comfort. "Now I'm sure you're human. Because you chose to protect, not destroy." I stared at the wet glimmer of streetlight pooled in a crack in the concrete. The comment lodged somewhere behind my ribs, stubborn as a stitch you can't quite cut free. His hand found mine on the step. Warm. Solid. A brief touch, no pressure. Not a claim. A point of contact in a world that kept trying to blur. I didn't pull away. We sat like that until the rain eased and the city stitched itself quiet again. The abandoned hospital had the kind of silence that remembers names. Corridors slumped under peeling paint. Cabinets stood open like teeth. Dust softened everything to the same tired color. It smelled like paper, old disinfectant, and rain sneaking through a cracked skylight. We'd taken a corner ward on the second floor where the windows still latched. Emmy found blankets and a kettle. Leon curled under two of the former and watched the latter like it might hatch. Cass checked perimeters, with the bored competence of a man who'd made too many rooms safe. I counted supplies, because counting keeps my hands from telling the truth. He came back with a folder tucked under his arm. Not a file, a dossier. "Official paper walks differently." "Simon," he said, and the way he said my name made the room organize itself. He set the folder on a metal tray, snapped the elastic band. The cover bore a black stamp that had to be a joke, because human beings had authorized it. Urban Gene Omega. Someone had tried to scratch the ink off. It only made the letters mean more. My skin went cold. He didn't touch me. He stood where the light from the window could choose him or not. I pulled what I could. Ada helped. Don't ask how. I didn't. I flipped the first page. A birth date I knew and didn't. Month and day right, year wrong by a hand you could never catch. A list of childhood vaccinations, a string of clinic codes, then nothing for a long time. A gap, like a swallowed scream. After the gap, subject 12. Below it, the number that fit into the shape of my ribs like a key. I put my palm over it. Heat bled through the paper. "That's not my handwriting," I said, because I needed a small lie to hold in place of the big one. "It isn't," Cass agreed. "But it's your file." Another page. A note, in administrative language, that thought it was too smart to be cruel. Omega phenotype engineered for urban environments. PAC-independent integration. Hybrid receptor modulation. I heard the corridor before I saw it. White light, shoes whispering. A voice metronomed flat as a monitor. "The hybrid must not imprint. Urban conditions only." Another voice, brighter, like a teacher trying for kind. "He'll need a name." A pause. A smile you couldn't see. "He'll need outcomes." The old ward tilted. Emmy's hand found my elbow and didn't squeeze. She just existed next to me hard enough that my breath remembered itself. "It says I'm a project," I told the tray. "It says you were a project," Cass corrected. "Verbs matter." Leon peeked over his blanket, eyes huge. "Is that why your smell is weird?" I swallowed around the knot in my throat. "That's one way to put it." Emmy stepped around the tray, reading faster than her pulse. "They cut you loose into the city like a prototype sneaker," she said. Voice trembling with anger she ironed flat. "And if you scuffed, they'd just, what, polish out the person?" "It worked," I said. "Because self-harm wears many hats, and one of them is called humor." "I scuff beautifully." Cass's jaw flexed. He turned a page with 2 fingers, like he didn't trust himself not to tear it. There's more. A diagram I didn't want to be able to read but did. Receptor maps, annotated with familiar chemical shorthand. A dosage table for something labeled Ax9. Then another label in lighter ink, inhibitor, trial only. I heard the woman's perfume this time. A ghost of flowers too clean to have grown anywhere. Someone laughed behind glass. He calibrates quickly. Good. Pack responses are inefficient in modern populations. He doesn't ask for anyone. We engineered, well, I want to turn myself in, I said. The words arrived before sense could veto them. If I surrender, maybe they stop. Maybe it ends here. Cass's body made a quiet sound, like a door leaning into wind. No. It's the simplest way. It's the laziest way, he said, not unkindly. And it doesn't work. They don't stop with one subject. They write a white paper and ask for funding. I'm evidence. I tapped the file. Chain of custody, boxes, labels. You're a person. He tapped me, without touching. And there's a hole in the law big enough to drive a rescue through. I looked up. He forced his voice even, as if making it calm would make it true. Registration, custody, transfer. All of it assumes the subject belongs to a pack or the bureau. You don't. You are engineered outside the hierarchy. There's no statute that covers you. Legally speaking, you're undefined. Undefined is what they call a specimen before they assign a number. Undefined is what we call a loophole, he countered. We can make it a shield. If the law can't name you, it can't hold you. That's not how power works. It is how precedent works. He glanced at Emmy. Tell him. Emmy had already moved to the rusted-out nurse's station, scavenging forms, stamps, anything with a seal. If we create a paper trail that says he's under the clinic's humanitarian protection, as unclassified, and if we leak it smart, we force oversight faster than extraction. Bureaucrats hate 2 things, sunlight and paperwork they didn't author. She's terrifying, Leon whispered, awed. Correct, Emmy said briskly. Also, I can forge a transfer protocol in 15 minutes if you give me a working copier and a prayer. You can't just, I began. We can, Cass said. And we will. But it won't be enough. The door at the end of the hall creaked. Ada stepped in out of the rain like a contradiction. Bureau stance, civilian coat. She closed the door and set her phone on the sill. We have 10 minutes, she said. Maybe less. Emmy's eyebrows jumped. You are the scary friend. Ada ignored that. Her gaze snapped to the folder, to me, then to Cass. Warrant goes live at 0800. Protective custody. For a subject matching your description. They'll call it safeguarding. It won't be. Leon pulled the blanket up to his nose. I moved without thinking. Putting my body between him and the door, Ada watched the geometry of us change, and didn't comment. We can't win this in a hallway, she said. You need a stage. Press. Oversight. Make them choose between looking good and being monsters. Go public, Cass said, soft. Go loud, Ada said. I'll leak enough to bait the cameras. Emmy, you have a clinic with a tax ID? Emmy's laugh was all teeth. I have 3. Use the clean one. Ada slid a drive to Cass. All I could pull without tripping alarms. It's not enough, but it's a start. Her eyes came back to me, not unkind. Hale. Simon. Don't run. They're counting on you to panic. Good thing I'm very lazy, I said. It came out steadier than I felt. Ada's mouth twitched, like it wanted to be a smile but had paperwork. Clocks ticking. She was gone before any of us remembered to say thank you. The ward breathed again. The skylight dripped. Somewhere a pigeon expressed an opinion about our odds. Emmy cracked her knuckles, and began feeding a battered printer a diet of forms and lies. Transfer of care. Emergency guardianship. Declaration of quiet zone. She muttered as she stamped. If anyone asks, I'm a notary in my heart. Leon held his cup with both hands, careful not to spill. Are we going to be okay? Cass answered before I could. Yes. I wanted to believe him. I wanted to put the word somewhere warm and feed it soup. The light thinned from gray to darker gray. Emmy's forgeries dried on the tray like damp wings. Cass and I ended up by the window because the room wanted us there, watching the rain screw itself into the city. He spoke without turning. I'm supposed to arrest you. I huffed a laugh that hurt. I'm supposed to run. Looks like we're both bad at our jobs. His mouth curved. The curve dropped when he added, barely above the rain, I can't do it, Simon. Something inside me loosened. Horribly. And maybe forever. I know. He finally looked over. You don't owe them your body. Or your silence. I owe the kid my spine, I said, tipping my head toward Leanne. And I owe myself. Something I haven't named yet. Name it on camera, he said. Make them write you into the world, in ink. I braced my hands on the cold sill, and let the hospital's old bones hold me up. The first time I'd smelled him, he'd said home. I'd laughed it off because home was a puzzle with pieces I didn't own. Outside, the city blinked, water on all its lids. Inside, Emmy stacked our paper shield. Leon breathed like the room had learned how. Cass stood so close, his heat edged the chill. Okay, I said. We play it public. We play it loud, Cass said. And if they come early? Emmy asked, without looking up. Then, I said, and for once my voice didn't ask permission from any past, we make the whole city watch. The bureau never looked more alive. Reporters crowded the marble atrium, their cameras blinking like a swarm of insects. Banners from the major packs draped the balconies. Wolves, lions, eagles, symbols of a hierarchy that thought itself permanent. The air smelled of polished metal, nerves, and too much perfume trying to cover fear. I had never stood in front of so many people. Cass stood beside me, steady as stone, his jacket unbuttoned, bureau badge gleaming one last time. Emmy had bullied my shirt into something close to formal, and was now perched near the press line with a grin that said, burn it down politely. Ada moved like a blade through the chaos, tablet in hand. When she reached us, she gave Cass a look that was both fond and furious. Once we start, she murmured, there's no going back. You still have time to pretend you're sane. Cass smiled faintly. Wouldn't want to ruin my reputation. Ada sighed and turned to me. They'll call you an anomaly. Don't argue the word. Replace it. With what? Person. The gavel struck wood, echoing through the hall. Cameras turned. Microphones rose like spears. Proceedings on Subject 12. Alias Dr. Simon Hale, the chairwoman announced. Accusations include genetic tampering, illegal identity concealment, and, she hesitated, glancing at the crowd, threat to the integrity of pack law. I could feel the weight of every gaze. Omegas looked afraid. Alphas looked hungry. I wondered which I frightened more. Cass stepped forward, voice crisp. Agent Cass Ward, Bureau of Werebeast Affairs. I stand as witness. Whispers rippled through the audience. Ada activated the screen behind us, the hologram of my file floating in blue light. Before accusations continue, she said clearly, let the record show that the subject in question was created by Bureau-funded research under the code name Urban Gene-O. That program was terminated without disclosure. We are not here to debate his existence. We are here to decide what the law does when confronted with what it never accounted for. The chairwoman frowned. Counselor Ada, you are out of order. I'm perfectly in order, Ada said sweetly. The law demands classification. This man has none, therefore he cannot be tried under hierarchy statutes. Either we destroy what we created, or we evolve. The press went wild, cameras flashing, questions shouted, flashes of red light turning everything strobe fast. The representative from the Wolf Consortium stood, teeth flashing. He is not one of us. You expect us to tolerate a manufactured Omega living among our people? Ada didn't blink. You tolerate artificial intelligence managing your borders, cloned, organs in your hospitals, and synthetic pheromones in your colognes. Perhaps your hypocrisy has a threshold I can't see. A few reporters laughed. The Wolf rep sat down, hissing. My pulse hammered. But my voice, when it came, was calm. I'm not an error, I said. The room froze. I took a breath, slow and clean. I'm not an experiment that escaped. I'm the byproduct of your fear, the part that wanted to build perfection instead of accepting difference. You made me to adapt, and I did. I survived. I learned. I lived. My reflection wavered in the glass wall beyond the podium. Pale, still, human. I'm not asking for forgiveness, I'm asking you to look at me and realize I'm not the problem. The fear that built me is..." For a heartbeat, nothing moved. Then applause. Hesitant, scattered, but real. Someone in the back shouted, "Let him speak!" The ripple grew. Cass's hand brushed mine, grounding. I didn't look at him. Because if I did, I might forget to breathe. The chairwoman banged the gavel again. "Enough. Agent Ward, you are accused of obstructing an active investigation, concealing evidence, and compromising bureau protocol. Do you have a statement?" Cass stepped forward, every inch of him unrepentant. "Yes." He turned slightly, so the cameras caught his profile and the exhaustion in his smile. "I concealed nothing worth hiding. I protected a citizen who saved lives while the bureau buried its mistakes. If that's a crime, I'll take the sentence." A murmur rolled through the room. Shock, admiration, outrage. Ada's expression flickered between pride and impending migraine. The chairwoman's voice cracked. "You understand this will cost your badge." Cass nodded. "Good. Makes us even." He reached into his pocket, unpinned the silver badge, and set it on the table. The sound it made was small but final. Ada exhaled slowly. "Dramatic idiot." He winked at her. "You taught me." The chairwoman gestured to the council. "In light of testimony, and due to the absence of legal precedent, this assembly rules that the subject cannot be prosecuted under hierarchy law. Effective immediately, a special committee will be established to oversee integration of unclassified citizens." The decision fell like thunder. Half the room erupted in applause, the other half in fury. The reporters shouted over one another, and somewhere behind me Emmy yelled, "That's my boy!" loud enough to hit every broadcast feed. Cass turned to me. "You're officially free." My laugh came out ragged. "You just lost your job." He shrugged. "Now I'm outside the law too. Means, I'm with you." The flood of noise blurred. All I could hear was his heartbeat beside me, steady as ever. He smiled. Not the tired field smile, but the kind that starts wars and ends them. Ada pushed through the press to us, hair half out of its tie, expression equal parts victory and exasperation. "You both just made me the most popular woman in the bureau, and the least employed. Congratulations. You'll land on your feet," Cass said. "I always do." She paused, then smirked. "Just maybe next time don't confess live on state television." He spread his hands. "You said go loud. I said go public, not suicidal." Then, softer, "You did good, both of you." Her gaze flicked to Cass's empty lapel. "You ever need backup, I'll still be your handler. Just not officially." "Friend privilege?" he asked. "Exactly." She offered a mock salute. "Now get out of here before someone realizes I'm helping fugitives." Cass slipped a hand against my back, guiding me through the sea of cameras and questions. Outside, the city light broke through the clouds, gold and soft on wet concrete. Reporters shouted our names. People pointed. A boy somewhere in the crowd, Leon, waved from Emmy's side. For the first time, the scent of the world didn't smell like antiseptic or fear. It smelled like rain and something new. Cass looked down at me, smile slow and certain. "So doctor, what does freedom smell like?" I exhaled. Home. Morning didn't so much arrive as stumble in through the blinds. Gray and gentle, rain dripping from the gutters like a tired metronome. The city below was still half asleep, its usual chaos softened by weather. From the kitchen came the hiss of the espresso machine Cass insisted on rescuing from an evidence locker. The apartment above the clinic wasn't much. One bedroom, leaky window, floorboards that argued with gravity. But it was ours, or at least, temporarily unclaimed by bureaucracy. Emmy's voice echoed from the street below. "Doctor, your alpha's in the kitchen again, and I didn't clean the counters. If he sees the mess, I'm blaming you." I leaned out the window, mug in hand. "You've yelled that every morning this week." She waved up with a smirk. "Consistency is key, sweetheart." Then she disappeared into the clinic, trailing sarcasm like perfume. From behind me, Cass said, "You know, she's starting to sound protective of me." "She's territorial about her caffeine supply," I said. "Don't flatter yourself." He leaned against the doorframe, wearing a faded t-shirt that had probably been black some time before the bureau. Bare feet, half-dry hair. A bruise along his jaw that the world kept forgetting to heal. He looked unarmored. It suited him. Unfortunately, it also made concentrating on my coffee very difficult. "Kids up," he said. I heard the Cocoa Massacre starting. Right on cue, a clatter came from the kitchen, followed by Leon's voice. "Emmy said marshmallows count as breakfast." "They don't," I called back. "And Emmy's a liar." "Then, she's my favorite kind of adult," Leon answered. Cass chuckled, stepping closer to the window. "He's getting bold." "Learned from the worst," I muttered. "The best," he corrected easily, taking the mug from my hand and sipping without asking. "You still take it too bitter." "I like it that way." He tasted again. Thoughtful. "You don't." I rolled my eyes. "You analyzing me now, agent?" "Not an agent anymore," he said, passing the mug back. "You made sure of that." The rain softened against the glass. For a moment, we both listened to it. The quiet between us wasn't sharp anymore. It breathed. Warm, human, unhurried. Cass looked sideways at me, expression unreadable. "You still don't believe you smell like home?" I took a sip, hiding behind the rim of the mug. "I smell like coffee and headache." He smiled, that slow, infuriating kind of smile that unravels you without effort. "So, home." "I walked into that one," I said. "Yes, you did." He reached out and tugged lightly at my sleeve. "But you're learning." Before I could answer, a crash came from the kitchen, followed by Leon's triumphant yell, "It's okay, I saved most of the cup." Emmy's voice bellowed up the stairwell. "If he floods my clinic with chocolate again, I'm adopting you, not him." Cass sighed. "You realize she's the only reason any of us are alive?" "I realize she's impossible to fire." "That too." He set the mug on the windowsill. "We should go easy on her. Then tell her to stop threatening to sedate me when I overwork. She's not wrong." I turned to glare at him, but he was already grinning. Bastard. A few minutes later, Leon burst into the room, wearing an oversized hoodie that could have been a tent. His hands were sticky with cocoa, his smile too wide for the hour. "Look," he said, holding up the mug. "Perfect ratio. 5 parts sugar, 1 part survival." Cass pretended to inspect it. "Needs salt." Leon gasped in betrayal. "You're worse than Emmy." "I take that as a compliment." The kid laughed and retreated to the couch, leaving chocolate fingerprints on every available surface. Emmy would combust. I decided to let future Simon deal with that. Cass watched me, watching them. "You know," he said quietly, "you did it. You built something normal in the middle of all this." "Normal's a stretch." "It's a start." He reached over, brushed his thumb across my knuckles, a small, careful gesture that meant more than any confession could. "A pack begins with 2, he said. "Everything else finds its way." I didn't pull away. Outside, the rain slowed to a mist, and the city began to move again. Buses grumbling, someone arguing with a delivery drone, the scent of bread from the corner bakery mixing with asphalt. For once, it didn't smell like danger. Just life. Emmy appeared at the top of the stairs with her phone. "All right, degenerates," she announced. "Smile." Before I could protest, she snapped the picture, Cass mid-smirk, Leon pretending to sip from an empty cup, me caught in that half-second before the blush hit. Emmy looked at the result and nodded, satisfied. "Not perfect," she said, "but real." Cass looked at me, eyebrows raised. "She's right." "She's usually right," I admitted. "That's what makes her unbearable." Emmy leaned against the railing. "Frame it." "The idiots who broke the bureau. It'll sell." "Get out of my apartment," I told her. She winked. "You're welcome for the memories." When she left, the quiet returned. Less lonely now. Cass reached for the mug again, sipping the last of the coffee gone lukewarm. "So," he said, eyes soft. "What now, doctor?" "Now?" I looked around at the peeling paint, the dripping window, the boy humming off-key in the kitchen. "Now we fix the world." Slowly, between caffeine doses. He laughed, low and warm. "Good plan." The rain started again, light as breath against the glass. Leon called for more marshmallows. Emmy cursed from downstairs, and Cass leaned his shoulder against mine, unhurried. I let my eyes close for a second, listening. To the city, the laughter, the heartbeats that didn't belong to fear anymore. The city under my skin isn't a mistake, I thought. It's the life I finally learned to feel, with every nerve. When I opened my eyes, the steam from the mug curled between us, carrying that impossible scent, coffee, rain, and something new. Home.